I forgive you, but I don't trust you.
Oh, ouch.
No, it's not ouch. It's a good thing. I'm drawing a boundary.
Okay.
Let me draw this boundary. Like one of your French girls. Mended light.
Okay, here's the thing. We're going to talk about the role of forgiveness in marriage and also in life.
How to heal and move forward.
Heal and move forward. Hallelujah. So many misconceptions out there about forgiveness. Forgiveness and trust, they're not the same thing. A lot of times when people say forgive and forget, move on, like it's in the past, let the past be in the past. You can forgive someone for their wrongs,
Yes.
right? And not trust them. Because forgiveness and trust are two different things. And we forgive to be free of hurt and of pain. It's not something to rush into, right? Like if that's
It's a process. It takes time.
Yeah. And if that's not a step that you're ready to take regarding a certain relationship or a certain experience, that's okay. And it's probably because you have some beliefs about the way you were treated and what it says about you.
Yeah.
And so working through those beliefs is something in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm abused or mistreated or anything along those lines, I might have internalized the belief to on some level I deserve this, or it must be my fault. Or maybe that's how other people in the situation treated me, right?
Sure.
When in reality, any type of abuse is never the fault of the person being abused. It is always the responsibility of the abuser. And it does not reflect on my self-worth or my value or anything having to do with me.
It's not always just abuse, because in cases of abuse, we talk about you can forgive someone without trusting them, right?
Yeah.
And you can forgive someone without still being in a relationship with them. Trust is necessary for relationships. And a lot of times where there's abuse, rebuilding trust may not be possible. Well, because you brought up it as abuse, but we're not just speaking specifically about abuse. But in other cases, there's just mistreatment, or there's hurt feelings, or there's things that happen naturally in a relationship.
Or there's wounds.
There's wounds.
There's wounds that two people have that have rubbed up against each other, and it's caused more wounds.
Trust is necessary if the relationship is going to continue, but forgiveness is just how we heal. Now, I learned something in graduate school. We were talking about a couple where there was infidelity, and the cheating partner was saying to the one who was cheated on, they're saying, you just need to forgive and forget. Like, I said I'm sorry, I stopped cheating, Now you're just holding a grudge and you need to let it go. And I remember my professor saying, she will never forgive him as long as he's being flippant about her pain and trying to rush her through the process. She will never forgive him until his remorse equals the pain that he caused. Because she needs to see that this won't happen again. And as long as his remorse is less than the pain that he caused,
Right.
she'll think this could happen again because he's not taking it as seriously as I am.
Right.
And so when it comes to establishing trust, we need to show that level of remorse. And it's more than saying, I'm sorry. The best apology is changed behavior.
Yeah. Humility, accountability, and changed behavior. And so if you're not seeing that, then there is no reason to move forward with trust. But you can forgive.
And forgiveness, as you said, is just letting go. It's letting go of bitterness, anger, and resentment. It's letting go of hatred and choosing to let the consequences fall how they will, or wishing that the other person well. And sometimes wishing them well means that they face the consequences because that's how they'll learn. But it is not seeking vengeance, right? That's how we find peace.
Sometimes we rush to forgive, and we don't really understand the process and the
Yes.
difference between forgiveness and trust.
I think the process of forgiveness is I don't arrive at forgiveness and now we've achieved it. I see it more as forgiveness is what I choose to do every time the hurt and the pain come up.
Right.
I don't arrive at I've forgiven you and then I don't have these feelings anymore. Forgiveness is this is how I handle it.
Yeah.
And trust has to be earned, right? Forgiveness can be given freely, but trust has to be earned. It has to be earned with the humility, with the accountability, with the change behavior.
And that's all I have to say about that.
And I couldn't change my behavior. Like in our dynamic, there are behaviors that I couldn't change until I forgave myself. And you may think that's paradoxical, not you, but you may think that's paradoxical. Like if you forgive yourself, you're letting yourself off the hook. And if you're letting yourself off the hook, how can you change the behavior? But that's not what's going on. Let me sum up. I felt a lot of guilt. When I realized just how much I had hurt you, I felt a lot of guilt, but it was healthy guilt. And it was healthy guilt because I directed it that way, because I felt a lot of shame and I felt a lot of self-loathing, but I recognized that through the years, my shame and my self-loathing were what were feeding into the problem. My lies, my dishonesty, my unhealthy coping behaviors, they all tied back into this belief that I didn't have worth, that I was inherently unlovable. And as long as I loathed myself, I couldn't change those behaviors. Because as we've talked about in previous videos, my dishonesty was so that I would gain acceptance. I was afraid that if I were truly seen, that I wouldn't be loved. And so in my self-loathing, my guilt for years was directed at myself. It was shame. It was self-hatred. In recent years, I've pivoted and I've directed the guilt towards the behavior. And I said, I love me. I am good. I am worthy of love. And I deserve to be the best version of myself. And then the guilt could just be, and I'm better than that. That behavior, I'm better than that. I need to do it differently. And that allowed me to feel just a healthy little burst of guilt to change the behavior and then to leave it behind. And I could tell you, I keep having these feelings come up. Even as I've changed the behavior or I'm changing the behavior, those feelings keep coming up and I have to keep saying, you've served your purpose.
Yeah.
At this point, I need to live in self-love because that's the only way I'm going to maintain the changes.
Well, and when you're able to offer yourself that forgiveness and when you're able to see the humanness of your own struggles and stumbles, you're able to then offer that same understanding and forgiveness that much easier to other people.
Yes. And that has been healing with, my resentments towards you and towards, frankly, several people in my life. And so loving and forgiving yourself is a gift that you give for your own healing, but also it's necessary for the change to happen. Again, most of our destructive behaviors feed into our self-loathing. Our self-loathing triggers the destructive behavior, when we engage in the destructive behavior, and then we loathe ourselves even more, and we stay in that cycle. And the only way out of it is self-forgiveness and self-love, and then we can change the behavior.
So for me, what that looked like was I needed to forgive and let go of the contempt that I felt towards you in being wronged, right? Mm-hmm. And as long as I viewed our relationship through that lens, I was victimizing myself.
The lens of I wronged you and I took these opportunities from you or took your happiness from you or this, that, or the other. You couldn't forgive and you lived in contempt.
Right. And so John Gottman talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I think they can all show up in ways where we don't forgive, right?
Yeah.
So those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, stonewalling, contempt, defensiveness,
criticism,
right? Those are also what we would call protecting behaviors, right? We protect ourselves in using those behaviors, right?
Yeah.
And so my contempt towards you was protecting me from not being hurt further by you, right?
But then it wasn't serving you.
Right. It was my contempt towards you was hurting me, right?
Because whenever we feel contempt, we are unhappy. And then we blame the other person for our contempt. And what you've told me before is that your contempt, like you had to take ownership of it. Mm-hmm. Because as long as you blamed me for it, even if that was justified, right? As long as you blame me for that feeling, you were waiting on me to change it.
Right. And it's a form of giving away your power, right?
Yes.
Because I was waiting for you to make it right so that I would no longer have contempt. When in reality, at any point, it was my choice to forgive you. Now, that doesn't mean I just went back to trusting you.
Yeah.
But I could forgive you and take back my own power and take back the responsibility for contentment and joy in my own life.
You really hurt a lot of people.
Sometimes you need to take responsibility for your own happiness.
You don't think that's a little selfish?
I don't know what to tell you. I'm happy for the first time in my life, and I'm not going to feel bad about it.
This happens regularly. We give away our power. Right? We blame someone else for our unhappiness, largely because their behaviors contributed to our unhappiness. But as long as we're waiting for them to make it right, we don't have say over our own life. We don't have say over when we heal. We don't have say over when we experience happiness again. We're just in waiting mode. And then the longer they go without making the changes we think they should make or making amends the way we think they should make amends, or saying just exactly the right thing, then the longer we're miserable and the contempt just piles up. This is why we talk about forgiveness is necessary for your healing. It's the way to purge all of that emotional bile. It's a way to get it out of your system. Again, in our relationship, I'm working on building trust, right? But you forgiving me doesn't actually have a lot to do with that. You forgiving me comes down to you not wanting to feel that anymore.
Right.
And in order
And feeling like you don't control my life.
And right now, at least to me, sitting here, it feels like all of the negative outcomes in our relationship are on me, but that's not how relationships work. And I had resentment towards you for some of the ways that you've talked to me or treated me over the years.
Because the contempt.
Because of the contempt and the anger. And I blamed myself for that because I thought, well, I did X or I failed to do Y. Now she feels angry and she's treating me with contempt. And if I had just done that differently, we'd be having a different outcome, which, to be fair, may be true. The issue with that is if I take ownership of it and she lets me, then what happens is what we just described. There's no healing for her.
Right.
And
I'm not responsible for my own happiness, you are.
And I'm taking inordinate responsibility for something that's not mine, which is there's our actions and how people feel about our actions, and then there's their behavior and the choices that they make. What I'm trying to get to is anger is a natural response to a lot of the things that I did, especially for someone with your personality type, right? If you were a healer...
And it's my responsibility to communicate that anger in a supportive way, is not avoiding or attacking.
But when you were attacking or when you were critical,
Right.
that was you.
Right.
That was on you.
Own that shit.
And in order for us to heal, like going in the opposite direction, you said to me that you were sorry for hurting me.
Right.
And that you were sorry for treating me in certain ways or treating me in ways that made me feel unloved. And that was healing for me because for so long I had just equated it all as this
justifiable.
Well, no, this is all my fault.
Oh.
Like this is all on me. And for you to even own the sliver that was yours, because I do maintain that most of it was mine, but there was that part that was yours. And when you owned it, it was such a weight off my shoulders because, okay, now we can start to have a dialogue of healing, right?
Yeah. Funny story about that. I was going to meet up with some friends for lunch, and one of the friends in their couples session with their therapist earlier that week had just learned about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I walk in and they're like, "Hey, Alicia's here." They're like, "She'll know the answer to this question." And I was like, "Oh, zero context," right? Well, I didn't know what they were talking about. Zero context. They're like, "She'll know the answer." And then so they start and they go, "Okay, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse." And I'm like, "Oh." And I'm like, I might know the answer to this one. And so they list them. Well, they list 3 of them and they go, "What's the 4th one?" And I said, "Contempt." And they're like, "Oh, good." And I said, "I'm really good at that one. That's where I excel."
They say criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and you're like, contempt.
Yeah. But owning that in our life, even in small moments, even with other people. And it's important to be accountable with humility.
Yeah.
And, throw some laughter and some humor in there. Like, if we've got to go through the hard things, we might as well at least laugh about it.
Things you could forgive me for were fairly obvious, especially to those who've watched this video series, my misdeeds, right, my choices. The realization that I had after carrying guilt and shame for so long that I needed to forgive you was a big one for me because for so long, my mistakes in my mind made your behavior justified and I blamed myself for them. How can we forgive someone if we can't even acknowledge that there's something to forgive?
Very wise, very wise, very wise.
When we take all of the dysfunction upon ourselves, this happens a lot in cases like ours where one party does bear a higher percentage of it. It ends up getting, like most of it gets put on them. And to actually separate, because I had to separate, here's what's mine to own. And here's what's Alicia's to own. And whether she owns it or not, which you did own it, but like whether she owns it or not, that's something I need to forgive in order to heal. Right? There's so many layers to this. And something that you taught me is to see the humanity in weakness. That when you were working on forgiving me, seeing your own weakness made it easier to forgive mine. Seeing your humanity made it easier to say, He's a good person just trying. When you forgave yourself for your anger, you talked about vilifying your anger. And instead of vilifying it, like accepting it as part of you,
Right.
it makes it easier.
And an important part.
And an important part of you, because it's your brain telling you something's wrong, right? It becomes easier to forgive me for my choices. And when I forgive you for things you said to me or how you talked to me, then it also makes it easier to forgive myself for my trespasses. The concise way to say all this is we're all works in progress. We all have rough edges. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. And it may be that another person's choices, their weaknesses, don't work for your life, that you don't feel safe because of that. And there's a difference between drawing that line for yourself so you feel safe, respected, and loved, and passing judgment on another person. And you can absolutely say, I see and value and honor your humanity and your struggle, and I don't hate you, but I just can't have you in my life. Right? That is a healthy way. That's a healthy approach.
Well, if you're working through forgiveness and deciding whether a partnership or a relationship is going to continue, it's also okay to renegotiate boundaries during that time. As I learned to not take so much responsibility and leave space for you to learn and grow in certain ways. And as I learned to take more and better care of myself, that looked like me communicating with you, I have this boundary right now of what I need and what I don't need. And that's an ongoing conversation. And sometimes we have it during our weekly couples council, and sometimes we have it, on a random afternoon where I say, hey, I'm struggling right now. I'm having a hard time, so here's what I'm going to do about it. Yeah.
Forgiveness is essential. It's essential for our health, our mental health, our emotional well-being. It's essential for healthy relationships. In a healthy relationship, it must be combined with trust. And where trust has been broken, if we're going to try again, then it has to be earned.
You have to work through the steps to rebuild the trust.
We can't just lay it at the feet of the person who's been hurt to say, now you need to forgive and you need to extend trust. The person who did the hurting has to do that work if there's going to be a relationship. Hope you're enjoying this marriage problem series.
Yay!
It takes a lot out of, I don't know.
It's exhausting.
It takes a lot.
It's emotionally exhausting to do this.
And we're revisiting a lot of things that aren't always pleasant to revisit, but we do it because we love you. And if you'd like to pay it forward, share in the comments below what your struggles are with this, with forgiving, what your successes are so that we can learn and grow from one another. Until next time, folks, keep shining because we need your light.